The head of the Arab League is warning the escalating conflict between the US and Iran is plunging the entire region into further destruction and economic decline. The United States military says its latest round of airstrikes targeted Iran's Revolutionary Guards. According to US Central Command, Saturday night's operation was meant to, quote, punish the IRGC for attacking American troops in Jordan. 2 military service members were killed in an Iranian strike at a base there earlier on Saturday. And Iran, in turn, is targeting US bases across the region. Sirens have sounded in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. Kuwait's electricity ministry says power and water desalination plant has been attacked in 2 days. Iranian media is reporting the military has targeted US interests at 2 bases in Kuwait. Rasul Surda is in Tehran and takes us through the impact of the US attacks in Iran.
The United States has carried out another wave of attacks on Iran, particularly focusing on Hormuzgan and Khuzestan provinces. But among them, the most important one was a nuclear power plant being hit by Americans. So Iranian Atomic Energy Organization is confirming that several American projectiles have been launched on the Darkhovin nuclear power plant. This is the first time since the beginning of the war on 28th of February we're seeing a nuclear power plant in Iran is being hit by American projectiles. And Iranians are saying that on Sunday they have downed 2 American MQ Reaper drones. These are quite expensive and sophisticated drones that are being used both for surveillance and also for attacks. In some cases, they have been used for assassinations as well. The most famous one is the one in 2020 when Qeshm Soleimani was assassinated by an MQ Reaper near Baghdad airport. Iranians are saying now throughout the war they have downed more than 150 American drones, and among them 30 of them were MQ-9 Reaper drones. Then there is another statement coming from the IRGC regarding the Strait of Hormuz, the main source of the tensions. So the IRGC saying that 2 ships that were attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz without authorization got involved in an accident. We do not know the nature of the accident, whether they hit the sea mines or something else happened. It's not clear. The statement is a little bit vague. And also the IRGC saying the other 2, they refuse to continue their journey. So at the end of the statement, there is quite a threatening language being used. And it says the vessels that are influenced by the words of the American enemy and enter the unsafe route will certainly have an accident. It's not clear whether this is a threat or a warning, but in the same statement, IRGC saying that not a drop of oil, gas, or chemical fertilizer will pass through the Strait of Hormuz without coordination and permission with the Iranian authorities. Rasul Sardar, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
All right, in a moment, we'll speak to Zain Bazravi, who is here in Doha monitoring developments across the Gulf and the wider region. But first, let's go to Paddy Culhane, who joins us from Washington, D.C. All right, Paddy, the White House declaring its 8th straight night of strikes as punishment for Iran. Is there any indication as to how long this operation will go for?
We have seen so many different mixed messages from the White House, especially U.S. President Donald Trump, since this conflict began. He did a brief phone call with a media outlet, and he was asked about the fact that Iran said it was basically tearing up the memorandum of understanding, and his response was, "I couldn't care less." So at times it seems the president is anxious to end the war. At other times he says things like, "I couldn't care less," and continues the strikes. A lot of this is going to depend on what kind of internal pressure the president gets. Let's not forget, Republicans in the House and the Senate, in a very rare rebuke, in fact, they almost never go against the president, they recently passed the War Powers Resolution, which said no more strikes in Iran without congressional approval. While the mechanism they used was fairly toothless, but as the week gets underway, now especially with 2 new service members dead, one still missing. It'll be interesting to see if pressure increases from members of Congress and the American people. This war is incredibly unpopular. The White House, during the brief ceasefire, was heralding the fact that gas prices were coming down while they're going to go back up again. And that is something that American people care very much about. And if the economy continues to feel unaffordable for the vast majority of Americans, that's going to put pressure on members of Congress. Let's not forget, we're about 3 months away from the entire House of Representatives running for re-election and a third of the Senate.
All right, let's bring in Zain Basravi, who's been monitoring developments across the region. Zain, clearly the US is not about to back down. Neither is Iran. Bahrain, Kuwait and now Jordan finding themselves still the target of those strikes from Iran. What has been the damage inflicted?
That is correct. Throughout this week, we've been seeing Iran mirroring U.S. attacks on it by carrying out retaliatory strikes on Arab countries neighboring it. What we know in the last few hours is that Jordan put out a statement saying on state TV that sirens were sounded in various areas across the kingdom, confirming 3 missiles were intercepted in Jordan and a 4th missile hit a remote area. That's according to the Jordanian military. Hours before this, the U.S. Embassy in Jordan put out a statement warning of what sounded like an imminent attack, and then a few hours later we had this. Earlier this morning, sirens sounded in Bahrain before authorities there said that the army thwarted missile and drone attacks launched by Iran. Kuwait also sustaining a wave of attacks that Iran described as a large-scale drone strike on a U.S. ammunition depot and air defense radar systems. What the Iranians continue to say is that they're attacking U.S. targets in these countries, but what we were seeing is Kuwait's power ministry announcing that for the 2nd day in a row, a water desalination plant and power plant came under attack. Large fires there that emergency responders had to contend with. Kuwait's government asking people living in Kuwait to conserve water and power at this time while their critical civilian infrastructure is coming under attack.
Yeah, troubling developments, no doubt. But just when we thought diplomacy efforts might have completely fallen away, Iraqi and Turkish officials are in Doha today. What are those meetings thought to be focusing on?
That is correct. The Iraqi Prime Minister and the Turkish Foreign Minister came for separate meetings at the Emiri Diwan, meeting with the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, initially to give condolences for the passing away earlier this week of the father Emir, but quickly pivoting, according to statements issued by the Emir Diwan, to discussing regional developments and how to resurrect diplomacy and dialogue. They discussed the U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding. We understand that they were also discussing ways in which to coordinate diplomatic efforts, joint coordination to de-escalate the situation in the region and enhance security. It is significant because Turkey and Iraq are both countries that border Iran. They are both countries with strong ties with Iran, and no doubt they'll be discussing ways of trying to bring political pressure to bear on Tehran to halt its attacks and return to the negotiating table. But the reality is that with Washington and Tehran, both with severe rhetoric with regards to any dialogue, pulling away from the idea of any talks at this time, any mediators that are trying to step into the fray right now will find it to be an uphill battle to get these two sides back to any kind of negotiating table and away from what we are seeing as one escalation after another as these strikes carry on from both sides.
Yeah, no easy feat indeed. Zain Basravi joining us from Doha. Thank you. Let's go back to Al Jazeera's Paddy Culhane, who is in Washington, D.C. Paddy, you mentioned domestic politics there for the US president. He is now also calling on Republicans to add Iran to a Russian Sanctions Act. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, this has been a president who's been very hesitant to sanction Russia at all. Obviously, he says very complimentary things about Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Republicans, though, in Congress feel very differently. There is a bill in Congress and it has 60 co-sponsors, which usually means it's probably going to pass, that would put 100% sanctions on any country buying oil or natural gas from Russia. It would also go after its so-called shadow fleet. the late Senator Lindsey Graham, who died unexpectedly recently. He was pushing for this bill, the president taking to social media to say they should add Iran to that bill. It's what Lindsey would have wanted. Obviously, Lindsey Graham was known as perhaps the most hawkish senator in the Republican caucus in the Senate. So the president saying there should be even more sanctions. So if there are any olive branches out there, there's none of them being made public. It seems this White House is very much going to continue with the harsh rhetoric and the military strikes on Iran for the time being.
All right, thank you, Paddy. That's Paddy Culhane joining us from Washington, D.C.